Today's episode is brought to you by the GG Button. Go to ggbutton.com and use the new coupon code we have for you, 1PVS2P at checkout. Hit that GG button to call out a good game or to troll your friends. Again, use coupon code 1PVS2P at checkout to save 10%.
Thanks to our friends at the GG Button for supporting our podcast, and thanks to you, the listener, for supporting us.
We're just days away from E3 2016, so we're here to break down all the latest game announcements, leaks, game previews, and predictions for the show. But let's not forget this week's new game releases too. It's Tuesday, June 7th, 2016, and you're listening to the 1P vs. 2P podcast. I'm Taylor Ray. With me, as always, is my brother and co-host, Ryan Ray, and we're both here to talk about the annual show that we love to follow every single year, the biggest event of the games industry. That would be E3. So we're talking about the show ahead of it because technically the official show dates are Sunday the 12th through Tuesday the 14th, so starting next weekend. But as early as tomorrow, Square Enix is going to hold their press conference, scheduled very early, tomorrow, June 8th, at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. So, we're going to talk about all our previews of what we're expecting from all the developers and publishers, but also some predictions as well. And we wouldn't be surprised if we heard of a lot of other news getting announced ahead of E3 later this week to maybe steal some of the spotlight. So let's talk about the schedule. Ryan, why don't you start off with Square Enix this Wednesday?
Right, so basically this should just recall Square Enix, the RPG apocalypse. Square Enix, of course, the popular purveyors of the Final Fantasy franchise. Confirmed likely to be showing at E3. Star Ocean Integrity and Faithlessness, that game is coming out later this summer. Final Fantasy 15, that's coming out later this fall. Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. We haven't heard much about that game. They showed it last year at E3. They showed some CG cutscenes, but not much gameplay. So look forward to seeing more of that game coming out. World of Final Fantasy. That's the chibi Final Fantasy game that was announced last year alongside the Final Fantasy VII remaster that they said they were going to be doing. And we don't really know what the gameplay of that is going to be like, but stay tuned for more news on that. And a nice surprise, Final Fantasy XII: The Zodiac Age, which is a PS4 remaster of the PS2 game, coming to the West next year in 2017 sometime. And a little bit more information about that. Besides having the usual HD remastered, remastered models and cutscenes, the game is also going to have autosave, shorter load times, and improved turbo mode. They've also re-recorded the musical score for the game, but they're also including the original soundtrack, which they haven't done in recent remasters. Final Fantasy X, the remaster of that, famously had a recorded version that was actually kind of worse than the original soundtrack for that game. So Square Enix seems to be learning from its mistakes and doing a better job with Final Fantasy XII, which is everybody's favorite Final Fantasy that they've never played. So,
yeah, according to you, apparently. Yeah, I never got around to, like you said, checking it out when it was released on the PS2. So I like the fact that they're remastering this. This is not a remake. So this is different from the Final Fantasy VII news that was an absolute bombshell during the last E3. Let's talk about some of our predictions for Square Enix. Maybe they might be announcing some more Hitman DLC. They've been doing a great job supporting that game instead of making that a full retail release, releasing that episodic. But perhaps we'll see more game modes coming from them this time around. Kingdom Hearts 3. They teased that last year, but we might get more details about that. And also, I Am Setsuna. What's that about, Ryan?
I Am Setsuna is a game that's coming out later this year. This is kind of the Chrono Trigger-inspired game that they're putting out, made by a new developer from them, Tokyo RPG Factory, which I swear is Square Enix's other nickname. But anyway, they've shown some screenshots and gameplay of this game. It looks beautiful. Looks gorgeous, and I can't wait to play it, but I'd really like to see more from that game. Of course, Chrono Trigger, everybody's favorite cult classic RPG. back from the SNES era. And I love to see that developers are going after that model of gameplay because, frankly, I think that was one of those games that really popularized JRPGs for the West. And people haven't really had the cojones to really go back and go after that kind of gameplay. So looking forward to seeing more of that.
So do you have any other maybe bombshells they might drop? Maybe some new games out there? Do you have any other bold predictions for Square Enix?
Yeah, maybe they'll announce Final Fantasy 16. No, Square Enix in the past couple of years has been very daring in their gameplay announcements. Of course, Final Fantasy 15 is at this point a decade-long development schedule, and of course, Square Enix is always on the forefront of making future RPG products. At this point, I think their well is kind of dry. They're kind of going on all cylinders. They seem to be acquiring all these other developers. Eidos is under them now. That's how they got Deus Ex. That's also how they got Hitman under them. If they're not making RPGs, they seem to be acquiring other studios to help them make games in other genres. Other than that, they're kind of like a wild card as far as other game. The Bouncer 2. Who knows?
Yeah, they've always been focused in the Japanese market, and at E3 it's their chance to shine with the Western audience. So it's possible that we might see some more ports, maybe some more mobile games, more Final Fantasy themed stuff, Kingdom Hearts mobile games perhaps. But yeah, it's hard for them to top what they did last year in that Final Fantasy VII remake news, which was insane coming out of... actually, they saved that for the Sony press conference, but even still heavily involved, and for them to keep that under wraps for that day during that press conference was just a huge bombshell. So, all right, let's move on to EA, Electronic Arts. Their press conference is going to start on the actual show day, which is Sunday, June 12th, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern. And let me preface this by saying, if you are actively interested in watching these things live, the best way to do this is by watching the live streams on Twitch and YouTube. And I have to say that I watched a lot of the live coverage of E3 2015 through YouTube, and it was fantastic with Jeff Keighley leading a lot of the interviews and sort of breaking down a lot of these press conferences after they happened. It was back-to-back conferences, and I thought the coverage was done extremely well. So if you're like me and maybe some of these days may coincide with days you might be actually working, you might want to sneak away and check out those streams on both Twitch and YouTube. I'll be sure to post those links in our show notes. But yeah, let's go on to EA. So confirmed likely we have Mass Effect Andromeda details, some footage from Battlefield 1, which we've talked about on the show before. And then, of course, as always, maybe the new sports stuff, right? The annual Madden, FIFA, and NBA. Although they typically save the biggest news for E3 with FIFA. So let's talk about predictions for EA. Ryan, what have we got?
So apparently there's some rumors going around that there's a new BioWare IP coming out. That is almost assuredly going to be some sort of RPG of some kind. There are also some rumblings about Visceral making a new Star Wars game. I'm not really sure what that's about. Taylor, maybe you know a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, they've dropped a lot of hints, and this project has been in the works for a little over 2 years at this point. But, they're saying that this game might be an open-world Star Wars game. It could be Han Solo starring in it. But there's a lot of speculation that this is going to be an open-world third-person RPG. This is not that canceled Star Wars 1313 game that LucasArts had been working for a while. This is a totally new, separate game, but we do know they're working on it. So we're predicting that EA might show maybe a cinematic trailer for this thing, but also more Star Wars news, Star Wars Battlefield 2. We've known it's been coming for a while, but we don't know if they're going to show off gameplay footage here at E3, but we're predicting that EA might. So, you got bold predictions for EA? Anything else, Ryan?
Now that they're kind of in bed with the Star Wars franchise, I would really like to see EA do something really different. And I think people that have been clamoring for a new Star Wars games, I would really like to see like a new take on the X-Wing TIE Fighter franchise. Space shooters are becoming all the rage now thanks to Elite Dangerous and the forthcoming No Man's Sky. I'd really like to see the very popular flight simulator of TIE Fighter come back. maybe Yoda Stories 2, Force Unleashed 3. There's a lot of potential with EA, and EA has a long storied history with popular movie franchises, particularly with Star Wars. I like to see them do something really out there. They brought back Battlefield, and that was a really risky move that really paid off. They sold a ton of copies of that Battlefield game last year, and they seem to be building on that game's success with a sequel. So, I'd like to see them bring back an old Star Wars franchise that they'd really like to see back in games.
Well, for me, it would have to be Knights of the Old Republic. I would like to see them do a more modern take, Knights of the Old Republic 3. So if I was trying to put 2 and 2 together, and we were predicting that they might announce a new BioWare IP, and then also that visceral Star Wars stuff, to me, put those two things together, that might be Knights of the Old Republic 3. So I would love to see if that project were one and the same, if there was that collaboration between BioWare, Visceral, and then EA publishing that title. So that's my bold prediction, Knights of the Old Republic 3. Let's move on to Bethesda, also on Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern, so pretty late. It's likely that they're going to show off Dishonored 2, some new Doom DLC, and Fallout 4 DLC. Those are all likely, but let's go on to what we're predicting. Maybe some Prey 2, or whatever that's called now. That project has been in development for a while now.
We've also heard some rumblings about a Skyrim remaster for both PS4 and Xbox One. Both versions of Fallout 4 are selling very well on both of those platforms. And they're talking about the Skyrim remaster having console mod support, just like Fallout 4 did. Last week, console mod support came out for Fallout 4 on Xbox One, and it was one of the most downloaded things last week. Bethesda is looking to experiment in that space and trying to get more console gamers in their kind of like PC headspace. So, looking forward to hearing more about that at some point, because Skyrim was a very popular game back when it came out 3 years ago or so. We've also heard some rumblings that the developers behind Wolfenstein: The New Order are working on a sequel to that game, potentially a Wolfenstein 2. That would be really cool. That game was super awesome. I think it did really well for them. And, reviving a really old franchise out of nowhere. So really, really cool stuff. Taylor, do you predict anything bold from Bethesda?
Maybe the next Elder Scrolls game, like instead of the Skyrim remaster like you're predicting, I would like to see their next take on it, something for the modern platforms. So, we have this leapfrogging thing between Fallout and the Elder Scrolls series with Bethesda. They're constantly working on that stuff. And, they sort of failed. There was a misstep with the Elder Scrolls Online, Tamriel Unlimited, which was a full retail game that turned into a free-to-play model. And it didn't work out so well for them. And they thought they could turn that open-world gameplay into a successful MMO. There was a lot of backlash over what that game was like, what that MMO offered. So I'd like to see them come to E3 and blow us away with a new Elder Scrolls game. They need to build off of that hype that they did at last E3, which was all that Fallout 4 news. For me, it was one of the biggest stories that they dropped all that Fallout 4 news. They said, oh, we're showing off all this footage. Oh, by the way, we have Fallout Shelter coming out on mobile, releasing now. And also Fallout 4 coming in a couple weeks. So it was totally unexpected, and I'm looking for them to do that, repeat that sort of momentum with a new Elder Scrolls game. Let's move on to Microsoft. Their press conference is scheduled for Monday. That's the next day, June 13th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So confirmed and likely we're going to see Scalebound. Ryan, what's that all about?
Scalebound is that Platinum developed Dragon / Beats by Dre game that they're showing off. It's like an character action RPG. It seems to be really themed around controlling dragons and music. That was shown off last year and then unceremoniously delayed. Looking forward to seeing some actual gameplay footage for that game. We also expect to be seeing more on Crackdown 3. That was revealed last E3. They showed some CG cutscenes from that game, and I'm looking forward to seeing that game running on Xbox One. That game, both on both Crackdown and Crackdown 2, were kind of showpieces for the 360 in the last generation. So looking forward to seeing what Crackdown 3 will be all about. And finally, Gears of War 4, which is coming out later this year. There was that Game Informer cover story earlier this year about that game. And I want to see what that game is actually all about. I'd like to see it in motion. Gears of War Ultimate Edition failed to impress anybody. And this is kind of I think the Gears franchise, like, really big last hurrah if they want to spin it off and do more with it. So looking forward to seeing more of that at the Microsoft press conference. Let's talk about some of the predictions, because in our absence, there has been some news on this front. Microsoft has been trying to push Xbox and Windows 10 synergy, what with the release of Quantum Break on both of those platforms. They seem to be hinting at their future Xbox games coming to both platforms at the same time. Future Halo games, future Forza games, so on and so forth. Any flagship Microsoft title is going to be coming to both Windows 10 and Xbox One. We also had some leaks this week. Let's talk about Dead Rising 4, which leaked out. Taylor, why don't you take it away?
Right. So there were some photos taken of some promotional material for Dead Rising 4, which it looks like it's Frank West, who was the original protagonist from Dead Rising 1. He did not appear in Dead Rising 3, so people are speculating that the rumor is going to be set back in the original Dead Rising 1 setting, which was in Wilmette, Colorado. So it may be a remake of some sort. It's not really clear because all we saw was a sort of grainy photo of the promo material, but wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft revealed something at E3. But yeah, Ryan, what you alluded to before, which was the news that was broken by several outlets, one being Kotaku, and then a lot of the details confirmed from Polygon about Microsoft releasing a more powerful Xbox One next year and a new Xbox One Slim coming out sometime later this year. So we're speculating that Microsoft might come out and announce some stuff here at E3 about it. The big news about this story is that the new model of the Xbox One is going to get a new, more powerful graphics processor and the technical capability to support the Oculus Rift. So big news here. We wouldn't be surprised to see, as part of our predictions, that Microsoft announces a collaboration with the Oculus, because if you noticed, all the major players in the VR space, you look at PlayStation with PSVR, right? You look at HTC Vive with their partnership with Valve. Nintendo is a bit of an unknown quantity at this point, but Microsoft with their augmented reality headset, their AR, might be looking into a console tie-in in the Oculus Rift. Oculus Rift, unfortunately, infamously, earlier this year, it sort of went through a very rocky start with a bunch of their pre-orders, getting them into consumers' hands. The technical requirements to run a Rift were just so high that people just didn't have the machines to run them. And maybe this new Xbox One might be powerful enough to support the Rift.
I think you're kind of bearing the lead, Taylor. I think the biggest news is that this thing is codename, which is codename Scorpio. I really have to laugh at that because, of course, Sony has been going with, more Matrix-style names, Morpheus, Neo, and Microsoft. I don't know what they're going after with Scorpio. Maybe they're going after zodiac signs. But frankly, I think this is Microsoft trying to change the messaging with Xbox One. They've been super unclear about the future of that console. They seem to be going after, like Sony, this kind of like iPhone style upgrade path where you upgrade your consoles every year or two, to kind of keep up with the times. And I'm not sure that console gamers are really waiting for that. Of course, we all want the best graphics, the best frame rates, where the games are going to be played, but both Sony and Microsoft have to make the case now for why we want these bigger, better boxes. Particularly with Microsoft with this news that they're coming out with basically a slim version this year and then a Scorpio next year. Why would you buy the slim version this year if next year's thing is already going to be way better? I don't get that move at all. And it just seems like the console space is becoming, again, like a Wild West. We live in such an age where, like, I think more people are kind of looking at the PC and saying, that's the platform I want to have access to everything. And console people are being kind of, unfortunately, left out in the dust. I really want to be rooting for both of these console makers. They're some of the biggest players in the space. And I sold my Xbox One earlier this year. And frankly, if you're looking at buying one this year, you're a current owner of an Xbox One, you really don't have much to look forward to at present time. So hopefully they'll come out. Hopefully they'll announce some games that really justify why the Scorpio needs to exist. And that'll be great for everybody.
Well, back to the slimmed down version of the Xbox One, this revision, this Xbox One Slim supposedly that's coming out later this year. The advantage here is that it might be less expensive, and that might appeal to some more casual console players. But I'm sure they're going to have to sacrifice some things performance-wise, maybe take out the piece that allows the cable pass-through, like hooking up a cable box through the Xbox One. They're going to have to lose some features if I had to guess. So, but I think you're hitting on something here, is that why would you buy a console right now with all this, these rumors, these reports that have been confirmed by independent sources with these outlets? It's just not viable. Microsoft is pushing really hard. I've seen commercials on TV for the Xbox One right now that it's $300. They have a big challenge ahead of them in order to market a more powerful Xbox One, the Scorpio, and this Xbox One Slim. So stay tuned for that stuff. They also need to really work on storage. I think a lot of people are buying things more digitally. They're taking up a ton of hard drive space, and they're frustrated that with like the current Xbox One, these models that have less than a terabyte, for example, like on launch, they can't install many games. So it's tough, and I hope that Microsoft clarifies a lot of these reports that have come out. May not have been in their original plans. They may not have been ready to announce this stuff. But with all these reports, I feel like it's a must. They have to address these reports, the stuff that might be coming out later this year and next.
All right, let's move on to Ubisoft. Their press conference is also on Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Confirmed and likely, we're looking forward to seeing more about South Park: The Fractured But Whole. They announced that game last year. This is kind of the follow-up to The Stick of Truth that was super popular. Ghost Recon Wildlands, this is like the cocaine-fueled Ghost Recon game that they announced last year, open world.
Multiplayer co-op, yep.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing more of that. For Honor, which is kind of the, let's call it Viking, Norse, Dynasty Warriors style game. Third person action. There's also going to be like, single player arenas in this game. Very, very interesting stuff. And probably the biggest news out of Ubisoft is that they're developing Watch Dogs 2, which came from a leaked IGN ad that they released early. And in response, Ubisoft released a teaser trailer for the E3 news about the teaser that they're going to do for Watch Dogs 2. So really meta level. But Watch Dogs 2, if you remember, is the sequel to the most pre-ordered video game in video game history, but is also one of the most disappointing video games in video game history. That game was a launch game for the PS4, and what a nightmare that game was. It was not great, very disappointing, did not play well. Within 2 weeks, probably destined for the bargain bin. And what we know so far about Watch Dogs 2 is that it has an African-American protagonist, and it's set in San Francisco, and that's about all we know. It supposedly it's coming out later this year, but that would be a pretty quick turnaround from the first Watch Dogs game. So we'll see. Taylor, are you looking forward to Watch Dogs 2 at all?
Yeah, I'd like to see them do another take on it, because the premise of Watch Dogs 1 I thought was kind of cool. This like GTA style hacker game, but yeah, it sort of fell flat for me too. What we noticed about this quickly pulled IGN ad is that it's coming out November 15th, unconfirmed. They might say something at E3, and we're expecting it for PS4, Xbox One, and PC, unless they're delaying it again for some reason. And with Ubisoft, it's sort of hard to really predict what they're going to do next beyond a lot of their IPs, like, for example, Assassin's Creed. They may announce a brand new one here. They've sort of taken a break in development for that series because they've known that the past two ones in Unity and Syndicate have not sold to their expectations. So we have here for a prediction an unannounced game. What do you got, Ryan?
I hope it's not another Rabbids game or another Just Dance, because Lord knows Ubisoft loves to bank shot off of launch titles. With the NX potentially coming out next year, Ubisoft is going to be there day one with all their ports. Maybe they'll say more about the next Assassin's Creed than we expect. They probably will show footage from that Assassin's Creed movie that's coming out. That's not strictly video games, but it is video game related. We'll see. Ubisoft is very predictable. I expect to see Aisha Tyler make fun of more cosplayers. That's always a great laugh. So
yeah, last year was really weird. Yeah. I think Aisha Tyler is a gamer anyway, which made it so weird that she was sort of teasing cosplayers that she was interviewing, between the breaks in the audience. And their gameplay demos, they love to trot out like teams of people and say, "Oh, we're here to show off like the esports commentary on this upcoming game we have." So if I had to guess, they're going to do that with Ghost Recon Wildlands. They're going to show off a co-op on several screens with people live on stage. Demoing that game. But with that, let's move on to Sony, which is also on Monday, very late at 9 p.m. Eastern. Confirmed and likely, we've got Horizon Zero Dawn, which we know has been delayed into the beginning of next year. Detroit, Ryan, what is that?
Detroit Beyond Human is from the developers Quantic Dream. These are the guys who made Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, which were kind of adventure-style narrative games where you're trying to uncover, in the case of Heavy Rain, you're trying to uncover the serial killer. In the case of Beyond Two Souls, it was kind of a more narrative thing, kind of like Telltale's Walking Dead games. And they always try to promote this style of game as like a tech masterpiece, which they showed last year. It was very impressive looking, but also has this like kind of uncanny valley style look to it. The characters always look very like dead-eyed. And hopefully it doesn't just break into a meme like Heavy Rain does, where Jason, the gameplay was just not very interesting to me personally, but I know a lot of people are super invested in this developer doing some great things. So we'll see. Hopefully Detroit Beyond Human will be good.
Yeah, the plot behind that is actually kind of cool because it's this android named Kara. She's escaping this factory and she's becoming sort of sentient. It seems like a neat premise so far.
Yeah, we're also probably going to be seeing some more PSVR talk. That is coming out later this year, sometime in October. Pre-orders went live earlier this year, and hopefully they'll show some more gameplay. Hopefully they'll have live demos for people at E3 to check out. I really want to know, how that headset performs stacked up against. This is the great new hope against all these other PC headsets. That were super unaffordable for people who didn't buy, $1,500 graphics cards. So I would love to see great PSVR games. And also Persona 5. This is the Sega/Atlas co-published game that's coming out exclusively on Sony platforms, both on PS4 and PS3. I would love to see more of that game. That was earlier confirmed to be coming out on February 14th of next year in the West. It has to have some time to be localized for the States. But yeah, that game is super stylish. I really love the Persona franchise. If you don't know, it's kind of like an RPG dungeon crawler / dating sim style game. Very, very popular, a very niche audience, but great game overall.
And our predictions for Sony is God of War 4. They need to come back into form with that series. Maybe a look at the PS4.5, which we have talked about here on the show. The PS4 Neo, which might support 4K resolution. Just like our prediction with Microsoft, a new console revision coming from them, and perhaps more Final Fantasy VII Remake gameplay, and then updates about Last Guardian, which they also showed off gameplay footage last year at E3 to huge fanfare because the fan reaction about that game has been tremendous. It looks stunning so far, and it's been through that development hell. It's been through a lot of delays and cancellations for that project, and it's been a long time coming. But we also have another prediction for a brand new project that's been rumored to be an open world game called Dead Don't Ride. We don't know much more beyond that. So maybe some surprising stuff coming out of Sony, and hopefully another bombshell like they did last year at E3 in something like a Persona or FF7 remake stuff. What about you, Ryan?
I would really like to see them trot out the new console and just confirm its existence, say when it's coming out, give a price point, and then move on. Like Microsoft, they've been super opaque about their plans with their console, and they need to be more forthcoming if people want to continue to buy games for their platform. A number of games are coming out later this year for PS4 exclusively, Final Fantasy 15, for example, and if I own a PS4, which I do, I'm very dubious about buying new PS4 games because I don't know if I need to prepare myself to buy a new console from them. Again, with this incremental upgrade stuff, you have to be very careful with how you message it, how you position it to the public, and it's all going to come down to what games will justify the purchase price of a whole new console.
Yeah, well said. Let's go on to Nintendo, and they're calling their press conference Treehouse Live on Tuesday, June 14th, so the next day at 12 p.m. Eastern. And what they're showing off is actually spanning over 2 days. And there have been a lot of news and speculation about what Nintendo was going to put out there, and then they squashed a bunch of rumors in the sense that Nintendo, the NX, is not going to be shown off. And the new Legend of Zelda game, they're only going to bring the Wii U version instead. But we do know that this is going to be a cross-platform game. The next Legend of Zelda will be put out on the Wii U and the NX, but they're not going to show off the NX version at all. But they've sort of pivoted from what they've said before. So Nintendo, instead of just saying, we're just going to show off Zelda, they changed their E3 plans very recently, and they've announced that they're going to be showing off live gameplay of Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon, already announced earlier this year. Also, some other upcoming releases on day 2 from the Treehouse presentation for the Wii U and 3DS, including Monster Hunter Generations, Dragon Quest VII, Fragments of the Forgotten Past, and that Fire Emblem cross Shin Megami Tensei Persona crossover, that weird game Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE. Super Japanese. That's that RPG dungeon crawler with a mix of J-pop in there. Super interesting to see what that game is going to be like. And then also they've formally announced in their press release that they are going to have a special developer Q&A about Pokemon Go, that augmented reality mobile game that should be coming out sometime this year, hopefully.
Tio, do you have any bold predictions for Nintendo? We, of course, know that the NX is coming. Do you think they drop a release date or a price or anything about that thing?
It would be awesome if they did. I think, Nintendo doesn't have a strong history of surprises. They've been forthcoming in all of their Treehouse events. There aren't a lot of teases, but I think now is the time in order to do it. They need to get back in the game and compete with Microsoft and Sony. And the only way to do that is to actually announce a release date for the NX and show us what it is. All we've seen now at this point are patent drawings. We had reports of leaked images of this mirrored controller, this boomerang touchscreen tactile thing, which turned out to be completely fake. And I would love for them to go up on stage and show off at least the controller. Show us what that's going to be. What is the NX supposed to be? They've said absolutely nothing. They've been completely dark about what the NX is. And I think if they were to surprise us with NX news, they would be gaining a lot of steam, a lot of momentum. That would just be a huge, huge news from their press conferences.
I would really like to see them show off some gameplay footage or a little bit more information about those Animal Crossing and Fire Emblem mobile games that they announced a while back when the Pokemon Sun and Moon news leaked a while ago. So hopefully Nintendo has some exciting stuff. They're usually kind of the wild card. They're absolutely not on the ropes. They're always the most interesting game publisher and developer to see. Pretty high level of quality. Let's maybe sweep Star Fox Zero under the rug, but I'm really curious to see what Nintendo has to offer this year.
All right, that pretty much sums up our preview of the E3 2016 schedule, including our predictions. Let's move on to this week's new game releases.
I love new releases.
We don't want to forget these because we have a couple here that are big games coming out. Starting off with Mirror's Edge Catalyst for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC. This is the sequel to Mirror's Edge 1 by EA, a first-person parkour open-world game. This is set as a prequel to the events of the first one. It's got an upgrade tree for some of your basic movement mechanics and combat skills, and the first game, it didn't have that stuff, so So far we've been seeing sort of mixed reviews about Mirror's Edge Catalyst ahead of its release this week. The game actually made one of Polygon's reviewers motion sick. Interesting.
Right. The game looks beautiful. I think some people are having some hard time going between the open world nature of this game and kind of the more directed game experience of the first game. There seems to be more combat also, which is something that I think people really didn't like about the first game a whole bunch. And we'll see in the end whether Mirror's Edge Catalyst is worth playing. I certainly will be checking out at some point.
Yeah, same here, because I really liked the first one, even though it did have some faults. There was some wonkiness when you were climbing over some stuff and you were advancing through levels that you weren't supposed to get to. You weren't supposed to be able to access. So if you watch some of the speedrunners who really broke Mirror's Edge, it's really interesting to watch. And the combat there was just absolutely atrocious. Basic skills. Every time you encountered an enemy, it was always best to run away. The gunplay was just really, really awful. The highlight for me from Mirror's Edge 1 was the time trials, was to perfect the traversal, the parkour. And I hope Mirror's Edge Catalyst also has that feature in it. But yeah, I will definitely be checking it out. Maybe not on release. I'm gonna wait to see more reactions about that game. Let's move on to Kirby Planet Robobot on the 3DS. This is a new action platformer with Kirby in a mech suit this time. This was at the last PAX, and people seem to really enjoy it overall. It's got over 25 copy abilities, including new ones called Doctor, Poison, ESP. The game also includes a new multiplayer mode called Team Kirby Clash, where up to 4 players can cooperatively beat large bosses. So, and this is something that the Kirby series has lacked before, multiplayer modes on handhelds. So
finally, the sequel to Kirby's Pinball Land that we've all been waiting for.
Oh man, you're going way back into the well for that one. There have been a lot of Kirby games that have come out since then. You know that, right?
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to, last but not least, on releases for this week, Dangerous Golf for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. It's an arcade-style golf game from some of the developers behind the Burnout series, so a lot of good history right there. Huge fan of the Burnout stuff. Essentially, it's this crash mode of a game with golf balls instead of cars, and the idea is to destroy objects in the room to cause as much damage as possible. Seems so far to have some technical issues on the PC based on some early reviews, including that it is only playable with a gamepad and not with keyboard and mouse, which if you're playing on PC, big no-no. And Kotaku's Patrick Klepek, he's a guy who's been with Giant Bomb, someone who Ryan and I have both followed for a while, straight up called this game boring. So not good news ahead of it, but the trailer footage, the teasers for this game, make it seem really cool visually. So hopefully it'll be a fun game to check out.
This is just a bummer. Why don't they just make a new Burnout game with a crash mode? Ugh. I was really super excited when this game was announced, and to see it come out and to have some technical issues that will be patched, and for people to just find it uninteresting. The Burnout games always had this like personality and charisma, and Crash Mode in particular was the highlight star of those games. They even made a separate game for Xbox Live Arcade that was solely based on the Crash Mode style gameplay. I would just really like to see them iterate on that.
Yeah, agreed. I would have loved to see a new Burnout game instead of this, instead of something with golf instead. Nah. They seem to be fans of developing games where you just crash a bunch of crap, and cars over golf is my vote.
Well, that's it for our E3 2016 preview coverage. Looking forward to seeing what these press conferences bring and all the future video games from Video Game Christmas.
Yeah, that's what you like to call it. All right, that's it. If you liked our show, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes and Stitcher. Please let us know what you think of our show.
You can also listen to us on Google Play Music, TuneIn, Clamor, or our website, which is 1pvs2p.com, or search for us using your favorite podcast app. There's a bajillion of them out there. All of our sources for this week's episode have been posted at the link in the show notes.
And to follow all our episode updates, check us out on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at 1pvs2p_podcast. There you'll know exactly when we put up our new podcast episodes. Check us out also on YouTube and Twitch. We occasionally stream on there, twitch.tv/1pvs2p_podcast. As always, we want to thank Phonetic Hero for the use of his songs for our show, Coffee Stomp and Super Manly Brothers X. Both of those songs are part of the compilation project Chiptunes Equals Win.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week with more E3 coverage.